Well, former U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Middle East Policy, General Mark Kimmit, is joining us from Washington, D.C. Thank you again, General. So we know about the airstrikes so far earlier than anyone was expecting, a sustained attack focusing on ISIL's stronghold of Raqqa. Tell us about the military hardware that we know is being used. What kind of weapons are these?
Well, for the most part, I think we're going to see joint direct attack munitions being dropped by F-16s, but also the reintroduction of the Tomahawk cruise missile into the battlefield. We haven't seen that for some time, and it looks like tonight's operation featured a number of the ground-launched cruise missiles, the Tomahawks, going against some of the fixed sites.
And why do you think we are seeing them being used here, General?
Well, first of all, it's a very, very large weapon, about 1,000 pounds in weight, with a very high explosive content to it, and very good against fixed targets and stationary targets. And of course, it has the added advantage of it doesn't require either an airplane to guide it in or a drone to guide it in.
General Kimmit, this civil war in Syria has of course been going on for more than 3 years now, and the Syrian opposition was asking for the US to intervene militarily. It didn't. These airstrikes of course aren't against the Syrian government, but they are nonetheless US airstrikes in Syria. What do you think it is about the fight against ISIL here that changed the tide?
Well, it's a combination of events. Number one, the large offensive into Iraq that started in June 10th, which put, quite frankly, Baghdad at risk. The success of the offensive down the Euphrates and the Tigris Valley up to the gates of Baghdad made it very clear that a significant ally of the United States, Iraq, was in peril. Second, sadly, it came very much to head with the beheading of the American journalists. That level of shock and outrage that was provoked by those killings in many ways spurred the president to make this decision.
And do you think this campaign can be successful, the aim of degrading ISIL, with the airstrikes alone and without US and its allies' troops on the ground?
Well, the first part of it can be successful, which is inside of Iraq. The combination of airstrikes from the coalition and the ground efforts by the Iraqi troops to regain lost territory is certainly an objective that's attainable in the next few months. It becomes a little more problematic when we're talking about efforts inside of Syria. The U.S. aim is, at this point, to arm and equip the moderate Syrian rebel groups so they can not only destroy Daesh, but also the Syrian government as well. We've had a lot of trouble over the years arming, first of all, vetting, and then second, arming the moderate Syrians, and their capabilities are questionable. But in the near term, regaining the lost territory inside of Iraq through this air-ground combination is capability.
And if ISIL will be degraded in Syria, does the US know who these moderate Syrian rebels are, and are they in a position to take ISIL's place, or will their demise ultimately strengthen Assad's position? Is there a moderate Syrian force on the ground that can take ISIL's place?
Well, of course, that's been the million-dollar question. That's been some of the reluctance demonstrated by Chairman Dempsey over the past couple of years. It is not as black and white and clear-cut as some would make it out to be. Even the moderate rebels, even the moderate opponents of the Assad regime, come with a certain amount of baggage to them as well. And of course, there's the fundamental question: if the rebels do take over inside of Syria and displace the Assad regime, have we just created another Libya situation? So that's why this has a long way to go. There's still a lot of questions that need to be answered in the president's strategy. And tonight is, as was said by an earlier contributor of yours, frankly, only the beginning to the beginning.
And how do you think the sort of aspect of US airstrikes in Syria work alongside the Syrian government, who are launching their own attacks against various Syrian opposition groups, but there's, as far as we know, no level of coordination between the two. But we have heard that Syria's UN envoy was told that these US airstrikes would be taking place before they did. I mean, how is this all going to work?
Well, the major concern of the United States, of course, would be that in the prosecution of this air campaign, that either Syrian jet fighters or Syrian air defense systems would be shooting at the coalition airplanes. And it might widely escalate the conflict to beyond what the initial goals are. The initial goals are right now focused upon ISIL. And in the short term, that benefits, frankly, the Assad regime. In the long term, though, I think there still needs to be some reckoning with Assad that is separate from and a second phase to what we're seeing in Syria now.
General Mark Kimmit, we thank you very much for your time and your analysis, joining us from Washington, D.C. there.